My mind cannot comprehend the implications that this video touches upon. This is about new DNA evidence and new video regarding the Bigfoot phenomenon, and the revelations are chilling, are shocking, it's just monumental. You may say, well, what does this have to do with Planet X? Well, in this case, nothing. But a quick update, because I get paid, this is why people pay me, is to keep track of the radiation levels, and whether or not there's a third object coming in, the trends on volcanism, the trends on cometary impacts, because that is our future. But I have some good news. The total number of background particles had leveled off, and now it's starting to decrease. Yes, the sun with the CMEs and coronal hole streams is beginning to reestablish its heliosphere, which was breached. And it was probably breached in 2009 when we had a huge loss of ice, Arctic ice, during a solar minimum. A record loss of ice ever occurring during a solar minimum is really something to open your eyes. But the sun is reestablishing its heliosphere. It's pushing these particles out, but the medicine is hard. I mean, there's a lot of radiation all around us in our magnetosphere, in the sun's corona, and in just the basic background X-ray flux in the entire solar system, just the background. So the good news is those levels are coming down, but not soon enough, and that the sun will reach probably a peak solar maximum in another year. 2023 will be the onset, and through 2023 we will see the sun's own baseline X-rays go up to its normal intense level during solar maximum, but we're going to combine that with the highest total particle counts ever seen in the solar system. It's going to be a really hot summer. But this video opens up so many can of worms, just like the Mars anomalies. When you see the government has lied to you, that evolution and panspermia and all that stuff takes on a different meaning when you start seeing all the anomalies that we have found on Mars. And people laugh at us and say we're hallucinating. Of course, those kind of insults are about keeping you silent and making you go away. But none of my Gale Crater videos none of them are around. They're gone. They've been scrubbed off my hard drive. I recovered my hard drive and nothing was on there from Gale Crater, but I still have the La Victoria Crater anomalies. But like a can of worms, I mean, that opens up so much. That there's hybrids, there's extraterrestrials, there's government lies, there's technology we're not being told about. But today's video is about Sasquatch DNA. And the implications are so profound. I'm actually getting chills right now talking to you about this. Because the Genome Project out of Texas, run by Dr. Ketchum, she very, very cleverly and quietly gathered specimens and samples from people who had been collecting samples. Now, there was a guy going around collecting samples promising certain individuals that they would prove that Bigfoot was alive. They would prove that you're not a crackpot, that you really did see a Bigfoot, that you saw a North American primate. But then every single lab test run on these confiscated samples turned up to be a bear or a horse or a moose. And the people that had surrendered their specimens were horrified, mortified, angry, pissed off. They felt betrayed, and it made me wonder why the government would go through such painstaking steps to make you disbelieve in Bigfoot. Why? What's the big deal? Why Bigfoot? They don't try to make you disbelieve unicorns, ghosts, mermaids. I mean, they'll debunk, but the amount of time, energy, and I just can say energy, manpower devoted to making you disbelieve in the Sasquatch phenomenon, it defies logic. It defies explanation. Why? Even if there was an extraterrestrial connection, admitting Sasquatch would not be the same thing as admitting extraterrestrial connection. So there was really no good logical reason until the bricks came tumbling down out of the Genome Project in Texas. And we all know that it's impossible to prove that something doesn't exist. Basically, Einstein, Tesla have said it, brilliant people have said, it's virtually impossible to prove the non-existence of anything, because no proof of existence is not, no existence of proof is not proof of non-existence. Did I say that right? Non-existent proof does not prove non-existence. Just because you don't have proof of something that exists doesn't mean it's not there. I mean, you can't see germs because you can't see them. Are they not there? But Miss Ketchum out of Texas did some very clever things. She collected these specimens. She promised these people that they were going to get a fair shake. She submitted these evidence off not as possible Bigfoot, but as unknown. Yes, thank you. Unknown. And we need to rule out that this tissue or this hair is not human. We want to make sure it's not human. So basically then, the labs were free and unencumbered and uncoerced in testing the specimens. They were just trying to see if they're human or not. The hair samples were sent off too. What was really bizarre is halfway through these independent verifications of the DNA and evidence and the hair follicle evidence and the feces examinations, Miss Ketchum got emails back from the people they were paying to do the testing, and they were asking her questions like, what are you up to? Do you think you've discovered a new species? Well, of course she's not going to say yes. No way. She says, no, we're just trying to rule out human DNA. Well, a dozen people were contacted, dozen laboratories, Canada, North America, I think even in England. I'm not quite sure about the England, but they were all looking at hair, feces, and tissue. And they all have come back with a bombshell: human primate hybridization. Now, many of you will think, well, that's the missing link. And that's what Miss Ketchum was hoping to prove, that these were old world leftovers that came through the land bridge, remnants of Gigantopithecus, a huge ape that existed long time ago and has since gone extinct. However, human primate hybridization can happen naturally, I guess, and hybridization in nature happens. I mean, look at the white bears, the polar bears, and the brown bears. Because of climate change, the polar bears are now interbreeding with the grizzly bears, and they're getting hybrid bears. Pretty soon those hybrid bears will form their own subspecies. That's how evolution works. But in this case, the implications are just so profound, and it answers all the unanswered questions, thanks to Miss Ketchum. And when she got the initial results, you had 3 or 4 labs saying human primate hybridization. And she's going to drop a bombshell now. That's all she needs. 1 or 2 labs will put you in the gas chamber for DNA evidence, right? They use DNA evidence to put people in prison for 20 years. Just using 1 or 2 labs. Well, now she's got 4 or 5 independent labs all saying hybridization. And so she was going to drop the bombshell, but then she realized she had all these specimens that were still pending, and she did not want to jeopardize the competency of those unyet analyzed specimens. And by going public on the hybridization could cause people to back out of their studies or alter their findings. And Big Brother could get involved. So she remained quiet until all the testing was in. She had to prolong her press conference twice, maybe even 3 times, which led to accusations of incompetence and and all the stuff that they try to do to discredit truthers. But it came out. She had a ton of independently verified analysis that stated that the samples they were looking at, the hair samples, were non-primate and non-human and not belonging to any known mammal in North America. They also said the DNA was clearly, even nuclear DNA versus the mitochondrial DNA, which they were able to find some on some of these samples, all suggested a hybridization of human and primate. And I mean, and we're not talking 3 or 4, we're talking more than that. So she got all the ducks in a row. She got all the lab results in, and when she had every last lab in her possession, every result in her possession, boom, she dropped the bombshell, and you know what? Hit the fan. OMG. Hit the fan. Well, the Genome Project was since closed down. She came under severe attack. And that tells me that she was on the money. Now, if you have a specimen or a sample, you submit to genome testing to one of a dozen genome testing places. If you tell them you think it's Sasquatch DNA, they will not even accept your specimen. So now you see why Miss Ketchum had to wait to make her announcement. It's not because she lacked credibility, it's because she wanted to preserve the credibility of all of these studies that all agreed with one another. Hybridization of human and primates. So why is this so profound? Why is this a can of worms? Well, it proves the existence of Sasquatch. And it stands to reason. It answers so many questions that have been unanswered. And now they're answered once and for all. And before I'm running some videos that are kind of buried on the internet. It's hard to find them unless you know exactly what titles to type in. They don't jump out you in search engines. But nonetheless, there's a concerted effort to get you to disbelieve. In fact, one of my favorite podcast type shows is called The Y-File. They do some pretty interesting investigations and they come up with some pretty good data. But on the Dyatlov Pass murders, the Russian hikers that were all suffering huge and tremendous bodily injury and physical trauma, crushed skulls, crushed ribs, eyes removed. Well, the guy from the Y-Files left out some important information. Like one of the guys wrote in his diary, the Yeti lives right before they died. And then there's that mysterious picture of the figure at the top of the hill. And then the Y-Files, when going through, all the theories on what could kill these hikers, they ruled out the avalanche, which it was stupid to think that it would even be. But when it got to the Yeti theory, the guy diverged from journalism and said, it's nonsense to think that a Yeti killed these people. That's right, nonsense. And it's nonsense. Why? Because him and his little fish that he talks to says it's nonsense. What evidence did he have to say it was nonsense? Well, none. And so why would somebody with such, funding and such technical support be so brazen and so divergent from objective journalism? And I mean, and some of these images I put before you, some of them may be disturbing. And the more disturbing ones, I will put up a warning or a disclaimer before they come up, because it shows Bigfoot shaking a tree, Bigfoot ripping bark off a tree, and Bigfoot ripping a aspen out of the ground and throwing it 20, 30 yards. Those are compelling videos. Now, they're not the greatest quality, but when you got a tree flying through the air, clearly it's very profound. In fact, the video that's running before you now, when you watch the original, you hear a rock hit the ground, and the guy picks up his camera and sees this figure behind a tree. And the figure sidearms a rock around this tree with his right hand, throws a sidearm motion, and you could hear the rock thump within feet from the cameraman, and then he runs. They went, why? Because this thing's throwing a 12-pound rock at him. This video is very convincing when you watch it with the sound, because you hear the rock hit, and this guy stands up, does a sidearm wing, like he's skipping a rock off a pond, whee, and there, clunk, clunk, clunk. So now, everything now makes sense. It's beyond discussion now. We have conclusive evidence, and you could shoot the messenger, and they did, and you could discredit the messenger, and they have, but the problem is you're going to have to go around and discredit all the genome labs in the United States for reporting hybridization of humans and primates. It can't be a missing link because there's too much inbreeding going on, and because there's just too few in numbers. I had estimated that there'd be about 2,000 population in the United States based upon the reports. And as we push out, and as drought and hunger drives them in, we're clashing more and more with these creatures that don't want anything to do with humans. They despise humans, they hate humans, they fear humans, much the way the Jewish people feared the Nazis during World War II. The same fear: capture, torture, experimentation. Why? Well, the Genome Project pretty much opens that can of worms for you. Because what happens is if we descended, this was the missing link, then the genetic profile would be slightly different. And the numbers would be different. There would be more like 20,000 Bigfoots rather than 2,000. Because they're so successful at what they do, they're so athletic, they're so intelligent, they can outrun small deer, they can outrun rabbits. They can stand still for hours and cover 20 yards in 3 steps. They can throw boulders the size of bowling balls like it was a baseball. So they shake trees, and squirrels fall out of the trees. Eggs fall out of nests. Little birds fall out of nests. They just shake the tree. Pine cones fall down. Pine nuts fall down. Acorns fall down. So these things are very intelligent because, sadly to say, they're half human, according to the Genome Project. And if what they report is true, what it really means is that some creepy people on more than one continent have hybridized and crossbred certain primates with humans. And I think bonobos, the bonobo monkeys, are prime candidates. They have the longest arms of almost all the primates. They stand up 5 feet tall on the stance, and they walk longer on hind legs than any other primate other than humans. They're extremely social, extremely sexual, and you don't see specials on bonobos. I don't know whether it's their sexuality that scares people, or the fact that they were apparent in a hybridization program. And so since hybridization's been going on since medieval days with primate humans, I mean, that's been going on forever. And it's not rocket science. It's very cheap, fifth grade science, except for the mating part. But, collecting semen and implantation is not rocket science. And it could have been done at any time. And in fact, before the birth of Christ, people were hybridizing felines and canines and rabbits and fish and birds. So hybridization can happen, using the polar bear and the brown bear as an example. You get a cross between two species. But how did it get there? You had to mate a white bear with a brown bear. And that is $1 billion word, mate. You had to breed. So we're not talking, extraterrestrials manipulating messenger RNA, which is, highly possible. We're not talking about modern day people using messenger RNA, but can you imagine being a king? Wondering if I could crossbreed humans with a gorilla, I could have an army full of super warriors. Why wouldn't you embark on just seeing if that was possible if you were one of those heathens? And remember, in Italy, the only people who were ordained or sanctioned to do autopsies was the Catholic Church. So they're privy to all the science that predates modern science. So the implication is just astounding. It's mind-boggling, and it explains everything. Now imagine this. Now, I mean, there are going to be some creepy pictures coming up before you. I can't narrate all of them because the Genome Project is really the basis for this video, because it answers all the questions. I mean, all the questions. Well, why does Bigfoot, first of all, if Bigfoot was a missing link and a parent, they wouldn't be that afraid of us. Their languages would be a little more similar to our language. Because why? Because we evolved from them. So, and the numbers would be greater. I mean, there's billions of us and only 30 million people in the United States and only 2,000 Bigfoot. Doesn't sound like we evolved from those 2,000 Bigfoots. So it's not the missing link, it's a hybridization program. So what would happen if you were captive and being experimented on like a Jew during World War II? You would try to escape. You would try to get your family to escape. And if you had superhuman powers, that would be highly probable, especially in the old days where everything was not high tech. How many steel chains did they have before Christ? I mean, so breaking out of an enclosure, being with superhuman strength, probably is predictable. And attempts to escape would be predictable. Anybody that's imprisoned is going to try to escape, even humans versus humans. So imagine if you were a superhuman. Now, some of these images are going to be disturbing because they show things that are just self-explanatory, even though some of the clarity isn't there. But there's enough information to make a firm conclusion about what you're seeing. But the rock thrower, you probably see more than you need to. I'll link the original video so you can hear that rock thud right next to the camera, man. But that's just amazing. This a Bigfoot throwing a rock. I mean, it would you get you can't do that with a monkey suit. But this, the one that the Bigfoot shaking the tree is so huge. I mean, the tree is swaying back and forth. And this video was sent in, to the various sources. And they don't get put it in front of you like other Bigfoot videos. Remember, hundreds of Bigfoot videos and stations have come out now. You try to research these videos that I'm showing you, and you'll get a pile of crap. Just like in the old days when you were trying to research Planet X. It was hard to get to the good scientific channels, and all you got was orbs and flat earthers and stuff like that. Which then buried the real research, kind of hid it in a mountain of a needle in a haystack. But then it also discredited, Planet X theorists by espousing flat Earth along with Planet X. Planet X wasn't flat though. Funny how that was. But anyways, the implication is that people were doing unethical, horrific things in hybridization programs like crossbreeding humans with primates. And all you need is one to take. And then if you could get one to take and you could clone, imagine the army you could have of something that could just grab a tree and snap it over, quicker than an elephant would do it. Throw it further than an elephant could. I mean, these things are superhuman. So that would be a reason to lie. That would be a reason to lie. Why? Because of the sad narrative behind the existence of these humans. And it happened on all the continents. And again, another thing that's really weird is some of the Bigfoot sightings in other countries take on the appearance of the native apes in that country. So if you're going to hybridize humans with a bit greater apes, you wouldn't sail across the Atlantic Ocean in the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s to go get a gorilla when you had an orangutan knocking at your back door. You would use the great ape in your neighborhood. And then all of a sudden, your hybridizations take on the appearance of your local primate population. And that is what has happened throughout the world. And some of the European Bigfoots look more Neanderthalish. Some of the Oriental Bigfoots are smaller. The orang pendek, they get the name orang because it's orange and lives in the same general vicinity as the orangutan. So if there was a hybridization program going on, this is what you would expect to see. You would expect the Bigfoots to take on the characteristics of the local primates. And sure, somebody may go to a zoo and grab a bonobo that doesn't live naturally in the United States, or get a gorilla and and inseminate and crossbreed. And so we know it's been attempted before, so there's no argument that it hasn't been tried. There's no argument. It's beyond discussion. But, and I'm sorry the rock thrower keeps showing up. I don't know why I got so many of him. But there's one here where a Bigfoot rips a aspen out of the ground and throws it 20, 30 yards, and that'll be coming up shortly. But the Genome Project really, you can understand why they shut them down, but not before they accomplish exactly what they set out to do. Prove the existence of Sasquatches, prove their genetic lineage, and they were trying to prove Hitlerish experimentations in labs. I mean, we've had very strong rumors and many people talking about Dulce, New Mexico / Colorado, where they were doing horrible DNA experiments on human beings. We're talking about extraterrestrial abductions, where again, the harvesting of eggs and sperm. So whether you believe Bigfoot has an extraterrestrial connection or not, is irrelevant. There's primate human hybridization going on. So that explains it. I mean, if you are a Jew and you escape from a prison camp, you would want to know if that plainclothes German at your front door has a gun or not. And the hunters and the people who embed themselves with these families of Bigfoot, they have stated that when a Bigfoot doesn't run from you and he's standing there and staring at you intently, he's trying to see if you're carrying a gun. Well, that's not so far-fetched now if you figure that these are humans that have escaped laboratory experiments and are on the run from the military, the Forest Service, the Department of Agriculture, the FBI, the CIA, and the Pentagon. These people are afraid of man. They're afraid of you because their whole origin is due to very unethical circumstances. And so it would stand to gain that they would teach their offspring. They would develop a language. They would develop tribes. There would probably be inbreeding going on. But nonetheless, they would not want you around. So these things, being nocturnal, able to see infrared, able to see ultraviolet, your trail cams are going to be useless. And if you did get a decent infrared of a Bigfoot, the detail is going to be washed out because infrared is just a heat signature and doesn't show you a whole lot of detail. So immediately you get a great picture of a Bigfoot on infrared and people are going to rip it apart because it'll lack the detail needed for conclusive evidence. It could be a man in an ape suit. But man in an ape suit would not give off a heat signature because the ape suit would serve as a thermal layer of insulation. Yes, I mean, it's just, so these things escape and they'll never catch them, especially in the early days. And these things can scale, 80-degree incline like it's not even there. They can run on all fours. They can get up to 30, 40 miles an hour on all fours. They could scale a hill faster than, as fast as any mountain goat. They could throw 30-pound rocks like it was a softball. So these things, they rip apart trees and get grubs. I mean, eating has not been a problem. The turkey, they love turkey, I heard. And in fact, they even imitate turkeys. So it's amazing to me that the Genome Project has uncovered so much and answered all the questions. These things hate humans, and for very good reason. And the government doesn't want you to know about it for very, very good reasons. It's because some of their affiliates, some of their relatives did the unthinkable, the unspeakable, and tried to crossbreed primates with humans. And H.A. Miller, the doctor from Harvard who had a strong genome background, he was working with genetics in corn and plant, became a doctor for the Forest Service, did autopsies on individuals that were killed in forest fires and killed by lightning, shot by hunters. He admitted the Smithsonian, the Forest Service, took possession of all carcasses, and people were told to keep quiet about it. And they were threatened to keep quiet about it. And during the Mount St. Helens debacle, where 3 different people, their children have written to different BFRO and Bigfoot research sites in writing talking about what their parents had told them. But H.A. Miller and a biologist that he actually worked with once upon a time from Texas, the biologist and him disagreed on the origins of Bigfoot. He thought they were New World apes from the south. She thought it was Gigantopithecus, Old World apes coming from the north. He characterized the species. He named the species. He gave them the scientific names, which you can find those scientific names on the internet. But he said in 30, 40 years, we'll be able to talk about these things. The people that were debriefing the workers at Mount St. Helens, debriefing the National Guard, debriefing the private contractors that were helping with the evacuations and of the injured. The ones that saw the deceased Bigfoots and injured Bigfoot. Those people were debriefed, and their children write that they were saying in 30, 40 years, we'll be able to talk freely about these animals. So what was so special about 30 or 40 years? They're not going to domesticate them. That's a given. So you can't make an army of Bigfoots. They don't keep well in captivity. H.A. Miller says they almost like program die if you put them in captivity. They just shut down. They quit eating and they die. So they don't want to capture them. And the other thing is what happens in 30, 40 years? Well, I'll tell you what happens in 30, 40 years. Those creeps who did the hybridization programs will be dead. They no longer will be prosecutable. There will be nobody to hang, nobody to answer, no heads to roll. In 30 to 40 years, we can say, oh, once upon a time, some very misguided individuals did a hybridization program. The hybrids escaped and formed their own tribes. We now call them Sasquatches, but they're half humans. They are humans. But if you're still too close, if the parent hasn't died long enough ago, and your offspring and your descendants are still closely related to, these secrets, the disclosure is going to take longer than 30 or 40 years, but the disclosures are happening. We have Bigfoot sanctuaries in Yakima County. There's laws against shooting Bigfoot, jail time, fines, all of this for an animal that doesn't exist. So, come on, people, let's get real. Also, I see passing before me is the possible Bigfoot video from Mary Greeley. We looked at this. There's actually 4 other individuals that you don't see in these clips, but they're all walking in unison, and they're all dragging their left foot, almost like they were marching. It's people in snowshoes. That's what it is. And they look big because of the camera angle. The same camera angle that makes the batter look bigger than the pitcher when you're photographing them from the center field bleachers. The pitcher's closer, but he looks smaller. But that's because the angle you're shooting down at is steeper. But so the Mary Greeley, those are not Bigfoots, by the way. I just thought I wanted to let you know. But there are pictures out of Yellowstone that are Bigfoots. And those you can't find anymore. Where do they go? I had made a video about them. It was very compelling. But anyways, so in 30, 40 years, there'll be nobody to prosecute, nobody to hang, nobody to condemn, nobody to hang out to dry, and we can figure out how we can do a rolling disclosure on the fact that these are humans that escaped from captivity and from horrible human genetic experiments. Thank you, Ms. Ketchum, for now answering all the questions. Why Bigfoots hate humans and why the government doesn't want you to know about Bigfoot. And it's just so profound. It's just so mind-boggling. There's so many rabbit holes that we could go down. But the question that comes to my mind is, now that we have laws on the books, emergency orders that can involuntarily confine you for quarantine purposes. So you're already subject to involuntary quarantine by many of the executive orders that have been posted as emergency resolutions for pandemics. You can be detained against your will. Call it a hotel, call it a camp, we'll call it whatever you want. Call it a shielding center. It's all the same thing. A green center. Involuntary confinement is involuntary confinement. So if these things, if, Native Americans, Native people, Aboriginal people, people that were actually slaves, were subjected to hybridization programs, what makes you so special? What makes you think that one day you can't be involuntary confined and that you can't be an experiment? Well, how many people took experimental shots in the last 3 years? Weren't even tested on animals. We were the animals. So testing upon millions of people without their consent, really without informed consent, is happened by the millions already. You may already be a victim of experimentation. So thinking that you can't end up in a lab somewhere locked up is pretty naive. Because now we've seen under extreme circumstances what kind of extreme measurements, what kind of extreme measures the governments are willing to take, confiscating children, like they did in Australia. It's just horrendous. Taking your bank accounts for supporting a protest. That is what we've all been fearing all along. So if what's going to happen to this group of humans, what makes you think it can never happen to you? Well, that's one of the big, profound questions coming out of this disclosure. The other thing is have they been able to hybridize gorillas with humans? Have they been able to clone? And do they have an army of Bigfoots that are trained? That's one hell of an army. And so, then you wouldn't need robots, would you? So a lot of questions start getting opened while many questions are getting answered. But the two biggest ones, why they're afraid of people, because they were created by people in a laboratory. Number two, why the government wants to keep it a secret is because the government and some of its affiliates were as low as Hitler. And who wants to admit to that, right? That's something you would want to cover up forever. Not my grandfather, not my father. He didn't hybridize humans and primates. I mean, that's where we're at now. The children of the people who committed these crimes are probably not too eager to have their parent thrown under the bus, their deceased parent. So the bottom line is they're human. Now, the sounds I'm going to play here really quick, they're called the Sierra Nevada sounds, and there's some out of Michigan. You're going to wonder how in the world you can get such clear audio when you can't get video. And the answer is really clear. Groups of hunters embedded with these families, they brought them food and water over the course of a couple years. They made it a point not to carry guns. They said, if you're looking for Bigfoot, don't go around knocking on wood, because Jane Goodall will tell you that wood knocking itself is a territorial and aggressive display. So if they hit you already, don't come into their territory, start knocking on wood, okay? The other thing is they said don't use tents and don't build fires. If you're going to camp, you got to make a lean-to or a hut or a teepee that resembles something that they would sleep in. Now, these hunters that embedded with the Bigfoot started getting these verbalizations, and they picked out ones that were non-threatening and would answer back, and they were starting to talk and communicate. These recordings that you're about to hear have been looked at by linguists, more than one linguist, and they've all identified phonetic patterns, which means it's speech. And it's really quite amazing audio. And the reason it's so good is because they already established verbal contact with these creatures that are nocturnal. I mean, it's hard to film things at night, you know. And so they could come into within visual of your eyes, but good luck in getting a camera. They don't want their pictures taken. I mean, what do you think a Jew would want his picture taken in World War II? You know, somebody come up, you know, can I take your picture in your house? You know, somebody wearing it. No. And again, the hunters say that if they're staring at you like really intently, they're trying to see if you're carrying a gun. And that would be something that you would want to know if you were running from government, hiding in caves. Is that guy that's in my territory, is he carrying a gun? So the hunters made it a point in this one canyon not to carry rifles, not to show their handguns, to conceal the handguns, not to sleep in tents, not to build fires, not to knock on wood, but to what? Food and water, food and water, food and water. And eventually, these hunters started talking in their human voices. Because now that the Bigfoots associated them with food and water, but still, you know, would get nowhere close to them, and especially not at daytime. And so these Bigfoots very gingerly earned the trust, and these hunters would talk in their normal voices. And in fact, on some of the recordings, you can hear them talking out and calling out to the Sasquatch. And they said they did this so that the Sasquatches could identify their voices with being good humans, ones that can be trusted. They hear their voice, they think food and water. They don't think run for your life. And when they see other humans, they think run for your life. Kill or be killed. That's basically their fight or flight. So then they invite these sound guys up that actually had parabolic dishes and high-tech sound, and they hang microphones all about and turn them on, and they record these sounds. They crank the mic way up. You can tell by the background static is really high, so that the microphone has been cranked up really high. So then, you know, they got great verbalizations. So I'm going to get to those verbalizations right now. I'm going to throw them on, and now you know how they got such clear ones without the pictures, because all of this is happening at night. And again, the point I'm making is that somebody crossbred a primate with human to get a Sasquatch. They're not a missing link. The DNA evidence suggests it's not a missing link. It's a hybridization. It's a recent hybridization. It's not one that happened millions of years ago. And by the sheer numbers and the inbreeding going on, you're looking at a few escaped individuals that then propagated. So, I mean, that's the only conclusions you can draw from the DNA evidence. There's no other conclusions if you understand genetics. There's no other conclusions you can draw, unfortunately. Now you know why they shut down the Genome Project, but not before. They did their job. So until next time, thank you for listening. And by the way, this phenomenal video is made just for the Patreon subscribers. This is what they pay for, exclusive content, not found anywhere else on planet Earth. Once again, thank you for listening.
Right there, just see movement right through there. There's two of them across the creek at the big rocks.
The recordings range from guttural growls to wild whoops to something that almost sounds like language. There's a retired cryptolinguist from the U.S. Navy. He's realized that there are phonemic patterns that repeat in the sounds. Those are words. Sasquatches might be talking to one another. Now, here's the thing about Bigfoot sounds.
Frequency, so it travels.
Has these low to high upsweep.
And finally, the chatter.
And those almost sound like words.